Welcome to Rosa's Meet the Funder event. Thanks so much for coming. I'm Liz Griffiths. I'm Head of Fundraising and Communications at Rosa, and I'll be chairing today's session. We've been joined by some of the top funders in the UK who we're going to hear from soon. The point of today's session really is to give you all some nuggets of information, some pearls of wisdom about what funders are looking for at the moment in the UK. We all know that the women and girls sector is very underrepresented in charitable funding generally, and it's part of Rosa's mission to try and make funding more accessible so that your services can continue. So I'll kick off by introducing the funders who've joined us today, and then they'll go on to present a slide each about how to access their funding best. So if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat, and at the end there'll be half an hour for questions, so a good chunk of time where we can talk through any questions that you might have. So we'll just start with Helen. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm just going to start speaking whilst I remember how to share my screen.
If you just start with an introduction and then we'll go on to the presentations after.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Helen. I'm a grants manager for the Henry Smith Charity.
Thanks, Helen. Now, Bethany.
Hiya, I'm Bethany from The Big Give, and we specialise in bringing charities, philanthropists and the public together to multiply giving, and we do that through match-funded campaigns.
Thanks, Bethany. And Aisha.
Hi, I'm Aisha from the Cloth Workers Foundation. I'm the grants officer here and I manage the small grants programme.
Thank you. And Rowan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rowan. I'm from the National Lottery Community Fund and I'm the head of funding in the South West, and I take a lead around women and girls.
Thanks, Rowan. And Lucy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Graham from Comic Relief and I'm a Senior Portfolio Manager on our Government Partnerships team.
Thank you, Lucy. And Sonia.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonia Forbes from the Pilgrim Trust. I'm the grants manager for the Young Women's Mental Health Programme.
Thanks, Sonia. And finally, Louise.
Hi, I'm Louise Telford. I'm head of grants at Rosa. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks, everyone. So we'll move on to the presentations from everybody. And just to let you know, all of these funders have a huge amount of information on their websites. So please do go and look at those. But the purpose of these presentations is to give you some kind of pearls of wisdom for you to take away so you know if these funders are right for you. As I say, any questions, pop them in the chat box and we can address them later. So Helen, would you like to start with your presentation?
Can you see my slide? Is that right? Has that worked? Great, okay, brilliant, thumbs up, thank you very much. So I'm Helen, I'm one of the grants managers at the Henry Smith Charity. As Liz mentioned, there's loads more information on our website, so 5 minutes is a really tight time frame to try and rattle through it. I've got a few headline bits of information on the slide, but also on our website, there is, and if you go into the looking for funding section, you can request a callback. And so if you wanted to have a chat with us about an idea that you've got to find out whether or not you fit with one of the programs that I'm going to talk about, then just fill that in and one of the grants managers will give you a phone back within a week or 10 days, depending on, well, at the moment, annual leave, basically, but people will give you a call back and then they've got time to have a chat with you about your thoughts or your ideas or how they might fit or not fit with us before you start filling in the application or anything. And you can phone more than once as well whilst you're completing the application. Anyway, we have two main programs through our main grants program, Improving Lives and Strengthening Communities. And through these two programs this year, we're going to give away about £40 million. So there's money there. You can apply for 3 years of funding at one time. In fact, we don't really accept applications for less than 3 years of funding. And it's a two-stage process that can take about 6 months. So you need to factor that into your time planning. But the first stage ends after about 8 weeks. So you'll get an idea of whether or not you're progressing to that second stage quite quickly. So you'll know like what's going on. Improving Lives is an outcomes focused program. So if you are measuring the impact that your service is having using outcomes, then that's the program for you, basically. As long as your organisation income is over £50,000 a year and under £3 million a year. And then you can apply to us for up to £60,000 a year. The grants are between 20k a year and 60k a year. So, and we can't fund more than 50% of your running costs. But we can fund running costs. So we can fund your core costs if that's more useful to you, or a project. We don't fund campaigning work. So if you do campaigning work, then you need to come to us for a specific project. But other than that, we can contribute to your core costs, and we can do it in 3 lots of 3 funding. So we can do it for up to 9 years. And then the other program that we have is Strengthening Communities. And this is focusing on organisations that are based in or next to areas in the 10% most deprived on the indices of deprivation in England and Scotland, and the 15% most deprived in Wales and Northern Ireland. And you can apply for the same amount of money, 20,000 to 60,000 a year for 3 years, but they're all running costs grants. Sorry, excuse me. So, and in every case, they're UK-wide. The main reasons that applications are not successful with us, and this is at first stage and at second stage, is to do with not giving us information about governance and management, safeguarding. Really, really, really hot on safeguarding. We want to see your safeguarding policy really early on. We're going to really interrogate it. So that's a really hot topic for our trustees. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but we might make a condition that you need a new safeguarding policy before you could be paid any money. And we will definitely ask you about it if we come and visit you, which if you get through to stage 2, somebody would come and visit you. So they're the 2 main reasons for Strengthening Communities are unsuccessful. And Improving Lives is basically the same, except also outcomes. This is a really key part, particularly at the stage 1 assessment. We want to know the difference that you're making, and we want you to tell us that in a quantified way. So of the 300 women that we worked with last year, 79% of them reported feeling more confident leaving the house as a result of 6 sessions of counselling. Be really, really, really specific. The more specific you are, the better chance you have. That's like the most important thing when you're applying to Improving Lives, about that, being specific about that outcome. Okay, my timer says 4.5 minutes, so I'm going to stop now, but there's more time for questions, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session.
Thanks very much, Helen. That was really, really helpful. And yeah, I did mention earlier about putting questions in the chat, but I've just been told it's actually easier if you could put them in the Q&A. So if anybody has questions, if you could pop them in the Q&A, that would be super helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move on to Sonia now, please. If you'd like to do your presentation to us, thanks.
Sure. Is my slide up?
I think we're just putting it up at the moment.
Brilliant. So hi again, everyone. I'm Sonia from the Pilgrim Trust. Just briefly context for why we've developed the Young Women's Mental Health Fund. As everyone in this room is already aware, I'm sure women's mental health has been on the decline for quite some time. And in recent years, young women have emerged as the highest risk group for mental illness. The pandemic has, of course, only worsened this. And I mean, the statistics are shocking, with 1/4 of young women having self-harm, which is more than twice the rate of young men. And 3/4 of mental health issues are established before the age of 24. So that's why we've chosen to focus on young women, specifically within the age range of 16 to 25. Our Young Women's Mental Health Program seeks to improve the availability and quality of mental health services for young women. Now, the program isn't for those with acute mental health difficulties, nor is it an early intervention project. We are trying to reach young women who have fallen through the gaps of preventative measures and early intervention support, those whose mental health problems are becoming increasingly entrenched and who, without that additional support, are likely to develop more serious problems. So that's something really important to bear in mind. We believe that 4 pillars are key to the provision of high quality mental health support for young women. The first is that you take a gendered approach. There are, of course, differences in the experiences of males and females. Women and girls are more likely to experience violence and sexual abuse. They are more likely to be in caring roles for children and adult dependents. We continue to experience limitations while navigating what is still very much a patriarchal society. And also in the context of mental health services, you know, research shows that there are gender differences that exist in terms of the prevalence of certain mental health difficulties amongst females versus males, patterns of help-seeking behavior, and even responses of the health sector. So what we're looking for is organizations that are mindful of these differences and tailor their mental health provision to the different experiences of women versus men to make sure that you're meeting the specific needs of females. And that for us goes far beyond just having a female-only service, which of course is a good start, but we want to see strong indicators that you have really taken on board developing a service to be truly gender informed. So are your services trauma informed because of the increased likelihood of the young people you're working with having experienced abuse? Do you perhaps offer childcare so that you're breaking down accessibility barriers for young women? Are there dedicated female-only spaces? If you're running some sort of workshop or discussion programs, are you tailoring those to make sure that the topics are particularly relevant to young women? Those are the kind of things we're looking for, a truly tailored program of support for young women. The next pillar that's really important to us is to make sure that the service is age appropriate. Again, we're targeting 16 to 25-year-olds. This is a huge transition period for young women. They may be leaving home for the first time. They may be starting a family. They may be going into tertiary education from high school, differences in parental relationships. And of course, a big one, transitioning out of CAMS into adult mental health services, which we are told time and time again is basically like a cliff edge of support, where we tend to lose a lot of our young people at a time when they need support the most. So again, just thinking about a young woman's experience, making sure that your whatever your mental health provision is truly catering to the unique needs of a young person. Again, for example, some young people, if your service is offering counseling, some may feel that they're not yet ready to sit down and engage in one-to-one formal talking therapy. They may need alternative therapies like art therapy or movement therapy or theater to build a trusting relationship before they're then ready to engage in more formal types of therapy. Young people may prefer to use technology more than say older women. They may prefer to have groups for just young people, perhaps sometimes feeling infantilized in groups for women that are for all age ranges. So these are just things to consider in your provision. We would just like to see in your application that you've really taken into account not just a gendered perspective, but also the age appropriate perspective to make sure that your activities are really going to attract young people and meet their own specific mental health needs. We'd also like for you to ensure that your program of support is integrated and that you're working with a number of different partners. Mental health problems rarely exist in isolation. And we recognize that there is, of course, a hierarchy of need. It's really difficult to support a young person's mental health and for that support to be truly effective if they're still sleeping on a floor or if they're in an abusive home or anything like that. So what kind of partnerships do you have? What is the strength of those partnerships? We don't expect for each organization to be doing all of these things. That would be a waste of resources. But do you have strong referral pathways onto other organizations if you're not providing that wraparound support? We also ask that the support is regular and ongoing. Our funding is over a period of 3 years. And the reason for that is, again, mental health difficulties it's not a quick fix. It's not going to be truly impactful. Improvements in a young woman's mental health isn't going to happen through a few sessions. So we like for there to be support that's ongoing, and so that you can allow a young person to dip in and out as and when necessary, because the last thing you want is for them to also feel pressured into support you're offering. And finally, another really important thing for us is the issue of equality. Young women should not have to work harder or overcome barriers to access the help that they need. So we want to fund mental health services that help to remove structural barriers to accessing mental health support, whether those be to do with gender, language, sexuality, disability, cultural needs, and so on. Now, in terms of our eligibility criteria, as I mentioned already, we award grants of over 3 years for between 60 to 90,000 pounds. That's 20 to 30,000 a year. In order to apply, you do need to be a registered charity or exempt UK charity with an annual income of between 100,000 to 1 million, and that's taken as an average over the last 3 years. You do need to be operating for a minimum of 3 years and be registered with the Charity Commission for at least 3 years. And you need to be located in a county in either the northeast or northwest of England or Northern Ireland. And you'll see in our really detailed fund guidelines a list of counties as well, in case you're not sure where the lines are. We are a UK-wide funder. This is an expanding program. So last year was our very first funding round with a cohort of 10 really fantastic organizations operating in Northern Ireland and Greater Manchester. So as you can see, we've now expanded that to Northern Ireland, Northwest and North England, and we do hope in the future to expand further out into the rest of the UK. So I do strongly suggest you sign up to our newsletter or follow us on social media, where we'll announce when we're increasing our geographical reach. And very quickly, because I know my time is up, if you would like to apply, you can just go onto our website where you can fill in a form to book a conversation with myself. We can discuss your proposal and we can take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sonia. That was really, really helpful. Let's move on to Rowan, please.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm from the National Lottery Community Fund, and some of you may be looking for a small project grant and some for a larger, longer term grant. I'm going to give some tips that are not on the website for both, and I'm very happy to answer questions. If you apply for a small grant of £10,000 or less, it will be assessed by funding officers who are in a central team. They're not going to be local funding officers necessarily to your area. And the feedback from the small grants team is that 25% of applications are rejected because of missing information, not because it's not a good project. So please check and double check you have the correct bank statements or the correct contact details before submitting your application. The other reason why they're more likely to be rejected is because an organisation might come straight to us with an idea without consulting with the people who are going to benefit from that project. So it's really important that the project has been shaped and developed by the people who are going to be using it. Okay. If you're applying for a larger grant from the Reaching Communities and Partnerships programme, there will be a local funding officer and a local funding manager covering your geographic area, and you can talk to us about your idea. If we're not the right funder for you, and we don't think your idea is fundable, we will tell you as soon as possible, and we will email you a reason, but ask for a conversation. If you want more feedback, don't give up, just ask us, and we can give you, some useful feedback. We fund a lot of specialist women and girls organisations, so please, come back in if for some reason you haven't been able to get a grant this time. So we know that we will want to know how women with additional disadvantages or discrimination will be able to access your service and get good outcomes. amongst from the women and girls that you work with. So think about who's coming into your service, the numbers, characteristics and needs. When they leave your service, how are things different for them? And what did you do in order to help that happen? And give us the evidence for that. So what you've learned from the women and girls using your services, and also how you're following good practice. You're the experts in what you do, so tell us how you're the expert. We're not the experts in what you do at all. We know that flexible funding is really important, so we can support partnership development, we can fund evaluation, we can fund organisations to increase their strengths of the organisation as well as what they're delivering. We are still open. I just really want to stress this, because even though we're doing a whole strategic renewal at the moment, we are very much open as usual for people to apply to us. And I just want to share one piece of feedback from a local funding officer, because I want to be really clear that we do listen, and we do then escalate what we hear up to our board and our CEO and to other funding teams. We know that organisations have been delivering at full capacity for 2 years, and it's not getting any easier. We know that more and more people are falling through statutory nets, and that the community is having to pick it up, and that you are dealing with more and more complex and difficult needs. We know that staff are tired and lack time and resource to think long term and to put in large funding applications. So if that is the situation you find yourself in, please do come and talk to us, and we can look at what idea it is that you have, that you know that your beneficiaries want, or that the women that you're working with want, and how could we help you with some kind of development funding potentially, or sort of working at your pace is absolutely key. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful to hear. Can we move on to Aisha, please?
Hi, I'm Aisha, and I just want to say that the people who are sharing where they're coming from, what organizations they're representing, it sounds absolutely fantastic. Just having you guys just popping up and seeing what kind of work you do is just great. So well done. Ours is pretty straightforward at Cloth Workers Foundation. We award only capital grants, which means anything that's tangible. So if you have an idea that you want a refurbishment of your building or a room, you want to even down to replacing the toilet or the boilers, we'll do the non-desirable projects as well, that you might have that you want to replace, that we will consider, including if you are being adventurous and want to purchase a property, that is something that we will consider as well. And there is obviously a criteria for that. So larger the project, the more requests that we will need from you, but I'll explain that shortly. And then obviously with the equipment, majority of the time we'll have IT equipment being asked for. So if you wanted to replace your IT equipment, we know that a fair few organizations IT equipment have been donated to, so we can replace that. Anything sports equipment or anything that's tangible basically, and also vehicles. That's quite straightforward. And when we say vehicles, it could also mean that will include trailers. We've had caravans, static caravans. So if anybody's considering like a respite holiday home for your beneficiaries, then that's something that we'd consider as well. So yeah, that's what we do in terms of awarding grants. We don't award any revenue over costs or anything core costs. We don't do that. It's only strictly capital grants only. You have to be a registered charity. Either you're registered with Charity Commission or Companies House, but you have to be a CIC without shares. If you are part of any other regulatory board, I don't know if I said that right, I always have difficulty with that word, then please let us know on the application form. It's not very common that we have that, but we'll still accept that. There are 9 program areas that we do look at, one of them being a domestic abuse, sexual abuse program area. We also look at homelessness, alcohol and drugs misuse, people with disabilities. We do include mental health in that as well. That's for young people and adults as well. Disadvantaged young people, older people, disadvantaged minority communities. When we're specifically talking about minority communities, we're talking about anybody who's facing some sort of discrimination, whether it's to do with sexuality, faith, and they are economically and culturally discriminated against as well, or at a disadvantage. That's who we'll look at, and I'm sure there's plenty more which will be on the website as well. Talking about our grants, under our open grants program only, it is split into 2. So if you're seeking an award for more than £10,000, that is specifically for equipment and buildings, you will be directed to the main grants. Why I say specifically buildings and equipment is because under the small grants program, we will fund vehicles up to £15,000. So just that side point there. Under the main grants as well, we don't have a cap of how much our award will be, but we will not fully fund under the main grants program. We will expect other funders, or depending how large the project is, or other donors and other fundraising efforts to be made towards completing the total cost of it. You will get a decision within 6 months. That's from the time that you submit your application up until obviously the 6 months when you get the decision. The income cap is 15 million. It's very rare that we do have that, but just in case if you are, then that's our cap. So under the small grants award program, we award up to 10,000, but as I mentioned, for vehicles it's up to 15. We are extremely very busy under the small grants. We've noticed that the success rate has increased recently because of the fact that we've tried to evaluate review our application form, and we've inserted sort of hopefully guidance notes that would be very useful to you. Please do read that. I cannot stress that enough. Please read the guidance notes because it is very helpful, and that's why people are, we're getting more great, fantastic applications coming in. The decision time for that is within 12 weeks. It was 8 weeks just recently, but because of the massive uptake of the influx of small grants applications coming in, and the very minimal resources that we have on our team, we've had to extend it to 12 weeks, but we will try to give you a decision within that time. And the income cap for that is 2 million. If you are just over that, we will use our discretion as well. So don't feel that you need to apply under main grants, or we're happy to, as mentioned earlier, you could always email us, and we're happy to answer your queries as well. If you have been awarded a grant within the 5 years, unfortunately, we cannot accept a new application from you. If you have been declined before with us just recently or many years ago, get in touch with us as well, and then we can discuss that with you. But I'll leave it there. There's lots more to talk about as well, but it's all on the website, so please have a look at that.
Thanks. I know it's hard, isn't it, just to give everything over in 4 or 5 minutes, but that was a really good run through. Thank you. So we'll move on to Bethany now, please.
Great, thank you guys. We're the Big Give, and we're a match funding platform which supports charities through a variety of match funding campaigns. And we help connect charities with champions, who we call our philanthropists, our trusts, foundations, anyone who's potentially interested in supporting charities with additional funding through a match funding campaign. And we're really fortunate this year to be supported by the DCMS through the Tampon Tax Fund to support women and girls charities this year. And we have 2 additional funding opportunities for women and girls charities. One is our Christmas Challenge, which is our biggest match funding campaign, which runs between the 29th of November and the 6th of December. And also, if those timelines don't work for charities, we also allow charities to run their own match funding campaign on our platform, and they can do this anytime up until the end of October this year. So the first and most important thing I would say is to understand what match funding is. And we found over the years that more people give, and people give more when their donation is matched. So if you're seeking to raise online donations or encourage donations from new supporters, or potentially inspire donations from lapsed donors, this is a really great opportunity for you to raise those online donations. It's also a really good opportunity to benefit from the DCMS tampon tax match funding, and potentially raise your skills in digital fundraising or unlock new fundraising streams. So if you're interested in potentially having a fundraising campaign, this is a really good opportunity for you to take part in. The second point as well, we're looking for charities that are led by, for, and with women and girls. And to assess this, we look at whether your governing document specifically mentions women and girls, whether you have a majority female board, who your beneficiaries are, and your web presence. Again, as the other funders have mentioned, this is all available on our website for you to probably have a good look at. But yeah, that is one of the key points. The second point is that you have to be a charity that's obviously working to improve the lives of vulnerable, disadvantaged, or underrepresented women and girls in England and Scotland. So in particular, in your application forms, we're looking at that impact section. We want to see how not only, the importance of your project, but how have you demonstrated that impact, and what impact that will have on the beneficiaries that you're supporting, and have you clearly outlined that within your application form. And I know that there may be some organisations here that are supporting women and girls in potentially Ireland or Wales. That's not to say you can't apply to the Big Give Christmas Challenge. You could still apply, but your champion in this case wouldn't be the DCMS Tampon Tax Fund. It could potentially be one of the other champions that we have that also join us for that campaign. So I wouldn't say completely write this off. I would definitely advise you to have a look anyway to see if it could still work for your charity. And finally, the final point is that you have to be UK registered charity with at least 1 year of filed accounts and an annual income of at least 25,000, or an organisation with tax exempt status for charitable purposes. And this is very important because it's part of our due diligence requirements. And again, a lot of the reasons why applications may be rejected, but it's because it doesn't meet that particular eligibility requirement on that occasion. But we have a full eligibility criteria document available to view on our website, and I would definitely advise anyone who's interested in potentially fundraising through this to have a look at that, because we state within that document in a lot more detail what we can and can't fund. So before even having a look at whether it's right for you, I definitely advise looking at that first. And also when considering what project you might want to apply for, I'd advise looking at what we can and can't fund when writing that application, because again, some other reasons why an application might be rejected is because you have a really great project, you meet all of the eligibility requirements aside from you're applying for something that we can't fund in there. And in most cases, actually, we will be able to contact you and say, this is a great project, can you change this part of your application? So there wouldn't be really a case where we'll completely cancel the application, you won't be able to take part. But yeah, I would definitely advise having a look at that first, and it kind of just takes away that step, that extra step that you would have to do. I ran through that pretty quickly, but my time is already saying my time's up. So yeah.
Thank you, Bethany. And really good to hear that you can support people with adjusting their application if they need a bit of help with it. So that's good to know. Okay, so we'll move on to Lucy now, please.
Thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Lucy from Comic Relief. I am going to talk mostly off slide actually, because I've put 3.5 because we were asked for 3 quite straightforward points on the slide. But I think context is really important, because I think it would feel a bit disingenuous to talk about kind of how to secure Comic Relief funding when currently we're not open, that we don't have any kind of live funds. So I just want to speak for 1 minute about that and just what the future looks like really. We do, our current funding in this space is our supporting and sustaining specialism fund that opened last year, and we've invested in 10 organisations working to end violence against women and girls, led by and for Black and minoritized women who experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and disadvantage. That fund runs until November this year, and Comic Relief are currently, we also have an international kind of Power Up fund, which is also kind of running its course at the moment. The first one is run by Rena Mehta, who I know many of you know, and Power Up is run by Anya Stern, again, who I know many of you know. However, Comic Relief is going through a strategy review process at the moment, like so many funders are, and I know that's a frustrating thing to hear, but it does mean that we're unlikely to be open for any funding until at least early next year. So I've tried to keep the points on the slide quite sort of generic to sort of tips that I think that are relevant to a broad range of funders at the moment from kind of what I'm hearing on the ground. Some things that are not on there that I think that we do know. There are a lot of things we don't know, which I'll talk about in a minute, but some of the things we do know that aren't up there are, we know that through our kind of quite strict eligibility criteria in the past, there have been a lot of people not able to access funding. And I know that in our new strategy, we are looking to really broaden that out as kind of the way we've sort of paved the way, hopefully, with the supporting and sustaining specialism fund. We're trying to reach smaller organisations that have been under-resourced and under-accessed. We know, so our eligibility criteria kind of all up for grabs, which is why I can't really speak to them today. So what did apply kind of last year, 2 years ago, will not apply going forwards. We hear loud and clear from our funded partners things that we are going to try and take forward. We know long-term multi-year investment is critical. We know unrestricted funding is critical. We know long lead-in times, not short application windows over the school holidays with 60 kind of hours of work to put into an application. That, you know, we are going to do all that we can to kind of change those those barriers which make it so hard to access Comic Relief funding where it is in our gift. And so there is a caveat there. We are increasingly funding with co-funders. We will always kind of advocate to those co-funders that we need to fund in this way, and to some extent we will have success, and in others it will inevitably harder, but that kind of feedback, we hear it loud and clear, and we have undergone a very detailed funding review journey at the moment, which is going to board next month, and I do feel hopeful that quite a lot of these changes will come into play. So that means kind of annual income limits, registration limits, having to have been live for however many years. You know, it's up for grabs and under discussion at the moment. So I will whiz through the slide because I have got about 1 minute left, I think. Not even. Okay, so don't be afraid to tell us what the work will actually cost. We know that people feel tempted to estimate what it will cost because it feels so expensive to put it down, but we know that can kind of get you into trouble a bit. Like later on, have the conversation with us, we can discuss it at assessment phase. We know costs are soaring. We would much rather a kind of honest conversation. We are increasingly supporting core organisational costs, and we can't always promise unrestricted funds for the reasons I've talked about, but we will support full cost recovery, and we want to hear the true costs of the project. So I'd really encourage that. We want to hear about the staff team, lived and learned experience, their specialism, and how they're cared for. I'm going to leave that one with you. I think it's self-explanatory. Thirdly, and again, sort of speaking from what I'm hearing from loads of funders as well as us, increasingly funder plus type of support is available. We've heard about it already in this session, kind of different types of support which funders can provide or link access to. I attended the data session earlier, that kind of additional support, consultancy support, backroom support, tech support, account management software, whatever it is. I'd say have an idea of organisationally where you need to build resilience, where you need to build capacity, because increasingly funders are happy to support that or provide support as part of a grant or in addition to financial support. And lastly, we have heard loud and clear about M&E demands, and really hard to kind of, especially in this area of work, to provide quantitative support, quantitative evidence. I keep thinking back to a funder partner that says, well, how do I measure the impact of that first cup of tea? And that can be like the most important thing we do in that week, is getting that woman through the door for her first cup of tea. Or somebody did not take their own life, did not attempt, make an attempt on their life. This is what we're dealing with. We can't put that into your really horrendously overcomplicated reports. We hear that loud and clear. We are revising it. We're looking at it. We're always, again, advocating for our co-funders, etc. But we will continue to seek commitment for participatory learning and evaluation and collaboration with. One thing I do know is we will be working much more in portfolios going forward. So our new strategy will absolutely work in that way, and we will definitely want kind of collaboration. We will resource it, but there will be obviously time commitments and stuff. So I do know that that kind of openness and collaboration will be really key going forward. I'm going to stop there. I'm well over time, but really happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That was really helpful and great to hear the examples of challenges that people face in accessing funding, and that you're listening to them. I think they probably all sound quite familiar to us. So thank you for that. And finally, on to Louise before we go to the questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding that Rosa has available, and a little bit about Rosa and our work. So we're the only fund specialist women and girls organisations across the UK. And our programmes change, so we always say to keep an eye on our newsletter. You can sign up via our website for the newsletter. That will keep you up to date with what Rosa's doing and all the funding programmes that we currently have. We thought it'd be helpful to talk to you a little bit about what our typical grant looks like. And that's typically between £5,000 and £50,000. Unlike a lot of other funders, we do fund campaigning work. So it's worth thinking about us if you've got some campaigning work that you'd like to undertake. And our next programme will actually focus on campaigning. It will be called Voices from the Frontline. It's going to be launched in the autumn, and it's going to be small grants focused on campaigning. So do keep an eye on our newsletter for when that new programme will be launched. To give you an idea of our size, in 2021 we made grants totaling 2.3 million. And the thing I didn't say, which I should have done, is that we fund across the UK and in Northern Ireland. So we fund in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. If you're interested in our work, do take a look at our website, do sign up to our newsletter.
Great, thank you, Louise, for that whistle-stop tour of Rosa's funding. So we'll move on to questions now. So I've had quite a few questions in the Q&A. I'll try and get through all of them, but if we don't manage to, I will direct them to the specific panelists who might be able to help, and see if we can get back to you with the answers. So kicking off, so we've got a couple of questions for Helen at Henry Smith. One specific question about one of the questions on your application form. Now, I think probably this is better dealt with later on, if that's okay, Helen, and I'll put you in touch with Louise, who asked that question.
It's actually a really straightforward.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so they've asked about need in 2 different questions, but we are asking about 2, and it's quite useful for anybody who wants to apply.
Right.
First one is about why your organisation is well placed to meet those needs. So it's about the skills and experience of your staff and your trustees, lived experience, sort of information gathering that you do. And then the other question, B3, which is about the needs and protected characteristics of the people that you're supporting. And so that's about who it is and what needs they have. And you can use a sort of a mixture of like research information that sort of says these are the challenges faced by people who have this lived experience, but also give us information about the people that you work with and the particular challenges that they face.
Okay, great, thank you. So one is about organisation, one's about client group.
Yeah, one's about sort of skills rather than
Okay.
need, and then the other one's about need. It's just sort of the way that the questions are framed.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answered your question, Louise. Another question for Helen. It's about the postcode criterion.
Yeah, we're more flexible than we used to be. So you probably would be absolutely fine if you put that the postcode in of your office, in which would be the park. We'll look at the map and they'll be able to see. And also you would put some text in the application form. There's a space there where you can that says these are the people that we're actually supporting. I don't think you, as long as it's sort of 10% or 15%, depending on where you are, I think you should be fine. You can also just give us a call and check, and then we can make sure we put a note on the record for your name and sort of look out for it if that's reassuring as well.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. So a question for Sonia. So somebody's asking if you fund in Scotland.
We don't fund in Scotland at the moment for the Young Women's Mental Health Programme. We have historically, we always have. This program is replacing our social welfare program, which was supporting early intervention initiatives for women and girls throughout the UK. As I mentioned before, because this is a new program, we've decided to expand it gradually because we are very aware that we're learning, and we, you know, if you're expanding slowly, you can learn and kind of make sure this is an iterative process and tailor the program to, you know, the feedback that we're receiving from our cohort. So we have increased the geographic reach since the first round, and we will continue to do so. So Scotland, it will eventually expand to Scotland as well, because we do fund throughout the UK. We do have other programs currently that are still available in Scotland to access.
Okay, thanks, Sonia. So a couple of questions about the cloth workers funding. So Aisha, Louise has asked, we need to update IT equipment, but also buy some external support, for example, an IT help desk. Would you fund that as well, or would it just be the capital cost?
The answer is no, we wouldn't support, or our grant award won't be towards IT help desk or any IT support, or not like broadband or monthly costs. So it's not that, it's nothing tangible in that sense. So upgrade IT equipment is absolutely fine, but that's as far as we go. We would consider maybe security. So if you wanted, you know, sort of the McAfee, whatever it is, security for the laptops or IT equipment, or you wanted Microsoft Word for the laptop, that would obviously the basics to secure your and help you function your IT work, then yes, we'll support that.
So the one-off costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then we've had a question about playgrounds. Do you fund playgrounds?
Playgrounds, yeah, it depends on, like, again, yes, we have funded playgrounds, refurbishment of outdoor work, that we do consider that, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And one more for you, popular with the questions. Would you fund travel costs? So somebody said that it's not always realistic to buy an actual vehicle, but it's more helpful to be able to pay for somebody's bus journey, for example.
Unfortunately not, no. And we don't, just to mention at this point as well, we don't, our grants aren't considered for leasing either. We don't lease any property or vehicles or any of that sort. It has to be an asset owned, ultimately an asset owned thing.
Okay, thank you. And one last question for you. Do you fund in Scotland?
Yes, so Scotland, yes, I forgot to mention that. So Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Welcome from all that.
So a question for Bethany. The Christmas campaign clashes with 16 days of activism. So after the DCMS funding, will there be a separate match fund for women and girls so that we can take forward fundraising campaigns outside of our main awareness campaign. So is there anything going on at a different time of year?
Right, yeah, so we do have the ability to run your own campaign up to the end of October this year. Obviously, if that's too soon for you and the Christmas challenge also doesn't work, I can't confirm anything specific after that date. We did have a Women and Girls Match Fund campaign which ran in line with International Women's Day earlier on this year, and our aim is to do that again next year, but that is still very much in the early stages, so I can't confirm that at this stage.
Okay, so just keep an eye out on your website. Is that the best
Yeah.
thing to do then? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And another question for you. Is there a maximum amount of funding available? So is that a 50-50 donation received in the Christmas challenge week matched by tampon tax?
Yeah, so charities can receive up to 25,000 from the DCMS tampon tax fund to be matched in online donations of the same amount. I should have also noted as well that any charity that does apply to take part in the campaign is also eligible to receive a digital capacity building grant from us. You get £375 just for any digital capacity building in your organisation, and anyone that applies can have that.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. This is a question for everyone, but do all of the funders accept unsolicited applications? Is it beneficial to have a connection as opposed to sending in cold applications? So I guess this is a question around whether people need to build a relationship, whether they need to call you beforehand, or is it best just to kick off with seeing the application first? Does anybody want to answer that?
I'll answer. So we are working very hard to be a more relational grant giver, and we're extremely aware of the pressure everyone in the charity sector is on, and we really don't want to waste anyone's time. So that's why we prefer that you not just make an application, but actually go onto our website to book a conversation with myself, so I can, with you, learn about your project, discuss its strengths, discuss some areas where perhaps it could use strengthening, and only release the application if we feel that there's a strong possibility that, you may be approved for funding.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to go ahead with that question?
I can answer that. Sorry, do you want to go ahead, Aisha?
No, go for it, Louise.
I was just going to say, we have open funding programs, and when they're open is the time that you can apply to ROSA. So we don't accept applications through the year, but we're happy to talk to you about your application before you apply, and you can get in touch with us. If there's a program that's open and you want to discuss whether it would be a good fit, you can drop us an email or give us a call.
Thanks.
Yeah. We echo the same thing. It's we'd rather you contact us in terms of emailing us at the foundation inbox email address, or myself, discuss the project. But our grant programs open all year round. We don't close at any point. So we do either happy to discuss, or you have to take an eligibility quiz to see if you do meet our criteria. And if you meet that, that's great. Then we'd just start the application form, because it's quite straightforward. Actually, it's hopefully not too daunting.
We would be quite similar to Aisha and the cloth workers. Our programs are always open. There's no plan to close them. You can call us and we can answer any questions, but you'll speak to whoever answers the phone, and that's not necessarily who would assess your application. So it doesn't make a difference, apart from that you can get that extra bit of information, and just sort of make sure that you're not wasting your time.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to answer that question from their perspective, or shall I move on to the next? Okay, there were lots of kind of nods and nods of heads there. Another question for Aisha, which is, do you fund clothing and footwear for beneficiaries?
That's always a difficult one, because historically we didn't. We classify that as consumables. Now we are considering it. However, we'd like that as part of a bigger project, where we do talk about the other tangible items that are projects that I discussed earlier. So as long as it's part of a bigger one, then we would likely, but if it's just solely that, it may be a bit blurry because we're just moving on to consumables, we have recognized that, you know, people are in need of that. But in terms of clothing and footwear, because there's a lot of high wear and tear involved in it, and then that would need to be replaced fairly soon. Whereas we're coming from like we want you to have it as an asset, like I said before. So we want it to be long-term sort of a project from our perspective. So, but happy to discuss that in more detail if it's part of a bigger project.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm afraid we've almost come to the end of the session today, and we haven't managed to get through all of the questions. But we have popped up email addresses for some of our panelists here, so you can contact them directly if you do have questions. And as they mentioned, most people have got phone numbers you can ring up to ask questions as well. So all that's left to say really is thank you so much to our panelists for their wonderful presentations and for all the help you've given us in answering those questions. So thank you to Helen, Sonia, Rowan, Aisha, Bethany, Lucy and Louise. Good luck with your fundraising, everybody. I'm a fundraiser, so I know it's hard, but I really feel for you, but I'm sure with all that information you can do. And enjoy the rest of the conference. The next 2 sessions are breakout sessions, so using campaigns to change the law and how to use social media effectively. So please do join them if you want. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.